Hello, hello. Finally getting on here. Sorry about running late. When you've got kids, it's hard to plan. While I'm waiting for Anne-Marie to pop on, just wanted to say welcome. If you joined us last week, that was awesome. Welcome back. If this is your first time, welcome. And we ask that you just join in. This is like roundtable discussion. We invite everyone to comment and all that fun stuff. As Anne-Marie and I were both just kind of separately asking the Lord what he wanted to talk to us, have us talk about. Can I even talk? We both were just really like burdened to discuss forgiveness. And it kind of both caught us both off as, I can't even talk tonight, girl. It caught us both by surprise. And it just was very evident and obvious to the both of us that this is like that moment of that final refinement as we finish out this year so that we can walk into all the Lord has for us next year, into that fullness. And if we don't walk in through forgiveness, we're not going to go as far as the Lord wants to take us. We won't be able to walk in that fullness if we are carrying around unforgiveness, bitterness, offense, all of that stuff. So I think it's just a really great conversation to be had. Of course, we have tons of scriptures in the Bible to read and to learn from, lots of stories. If we've had any kind of life at all, we have had to walk and deal with forgiveness at some point or another, and in varying degrees. We all know it's not easy. We all know it's not an overnight process. And those things that we've learned from that, and that there are just some people that will not forgive. There are some that say they forgive, but then they have conditions placed on that. And it's never really in a nice way. And sometimes it's laid out in a lot of like disrespectful ways. And then they also treat you differently. But then there are some that actually truly forgive you and walk out through that with you. And, we're talking both sides of the coin there. I think Anne-Marie had something to add to that.
I was just looking back at the different times that I, have learned more and more about forgiveness in my life. And so I had to look back over several years, and I just really focused on the beginning when I was unforgiving, because you grow up and you hear that saying, that's unforgivable. And every time I say that, I think of Princess Bride, that's inconceivable. Sorry. It's unforgivable. What you did is unforgivable. And we learn that as a mindset through most of our life. And then that's how we approach the situation. So we go in with that already in our mind. And so, there was just different periods of time where people would do offenses, and sometimes they were small. Sometimes it could be PTA moms being mean. Sometimes it could be a good friend who just, used hurtful words or actions towards us, and we just didn't forgive them. And one of the instances I had recalled was when I was pregnant prior to Georgia and had a miscarriage. And, when I did get pregnant with Georgia, I started bleeding right around the same time that I had when I miscarried, and I got very scared, and I was with this person, and I said something to them, and I just got oh, you'll be fine. And this person was so kind to me at the time of my original miscarriage that when I was scared at this point, I thought, oh, they would be a good listener. And then when it came back at me and it was something I didn't expect, I literally held on to that. I'm talking like 5 or 6 years. And it ate away at me physically. It manifested into so much more in my head than what it was, because I couldn't let go of those few words that person said. And who knows why she said it? She may not have even meant it. But, and I don't even know that she knew that she had offended me, but it rolled over into so many things in my life, and it just caused me anxieties. It caused me stress. It caused me so much time in my mind, in conversations I had with myself in my mind, that I would not have wasted that time had I gone into that forgiving her, whether the person knew that from that point forward or not, like in my own way, inside, had forgiven her. Years
Yeah.
of time. And that's the hardest part, is getting past some of those things and growing in it. And it might have taken me 5 years to learn that lesson. So then you know my dad and I always didn't see eye to eye, imagine that. um but I was one that, as I became an adult, I did learn years ago, as a young adult, you know, you may not have as much time with someone as you hope. And I didn't foresee anything with my father, but I just always knew if something happened to him and we kind of had an argument and then we spent a couple days where we didn't say much to each other, it would be devastating to me or to him. And so I always, made sure that there was a quick makeup and a quick, even if the words weren't said, it was just done. Just forgive the person, just let it go. It's really, and those are small offenses that I'm talking about. Not so much the big, that's unforgivable. But even those things are unforgivable, or even those things are forgivable when we get to talking into some of the deeper stuff.
Yeah, in preparing for this, I ran across a quote that Kim Pothier had posted. I got to give credit. She wrote, "Forgiving someone may cost your pride, but not forgiving them will cost your freedom." And I've learned throughout my life, on both sides of the coin, that you have to get to a place where you're willing to forgive without an apology, because sometimes
Yes.
you just won't get an apology. But if you really want to remedy the situation, just spiritually speaking, when you actually step out and forgive, like, you don't even have to tell that person that you've forgiven them. You don't even have to address the situation on the front end. But just walking with the Lord, like, through that process, like letting him help you forgive that person from a distance. And then it makes it easier to, like, approach them and discuss the thing, because at the end of the day, communication is key. And it's the most difficult thing ever. And sometimes it means reconciliation, sometimes it doesn't. It's all, like I said, it's all these varying degrees. But I think that's the hardest, that's like the hard part, is learning to forgive someone without an apology. And then everything else kind of falls into place, if that makes any sense. And I really feel, just based on my experiences, that the true measuring stick of success in the forgiving process is that when you can look at that person, that situation, talk to that person or whatever, and you don't feel anything negative, like you're not feeling anger, you're not feeling resentment or bitterness or anything like that, that you really are just, now you have a new, like, understanding about that person, about that situation. And that anger is then replaced by love for that person. But I know you had something to say about the reconciliation, and sometimes not, I think.
Well, exactly. I mean, there are times, obviously, if we're called to forgive in our marriage, you're going to reconcile. That's that's your main goal when you're trying to do that. But there are some relationships where people have crossed lines and hurt us. And I've had that happen, whether it's been, in situations in the past of neighbors or friends where they've crossed the line and hurt me, or even one where I've hurt another person years back. But it's doesn't mean that you have to reconcile and go back to that same old relationship, that you can set out your boundaries and know that that's just not something that you're willing to step back into. And it can be because, I mean, you can forgive someone and know that they still have tendencies to act in certain ways. I mean, and that's, you just know that. I mean, you can forgive them over and over again, but you can also put yourself back a little further and say, and I think that goes with what you were saying earlier, where, we can forgive fully, but we have to be honest with the person and say, hey, I think I forgive you, but I do forgive you, but I think at this point we just need to step away. I'll never forget, there was a misunderstanding between a friend of mine and I, and it came to ugly words. This was years ago, and I was like, okay, God, if you really want me to say I'm sorry to her, maybe she'll just walk out of this building in the next couple minutes, and I'll say I'm sorry. And she actually did. And I did, and I apologized to her, and she apologized to me. And but we both agreed that we had overstepped our boundaries with one another, and words that we had used, and hurts that we had said to one another. And we just realized, okay, let's just step away, and we're just not going to be friends, but we're not going to be mean to each other, and we're just going to, but we won't, I think I said, I just don't want to destroy the good memories that we had. If we can look back on those memories and know that they were good, and just know that we've had to move on in our life. And we did. And it was one of the best things I've ever done. Like, I just, it was a really neat, that was a huge learning experience for me. Absolutely huge. I want to go back though to that quote that you said. Do you have that handy again?
Yeah. It's, forgiving someone may cost you your pride, but not forgiving them will cost you your freedom.
Right. And I like that word that, that you had brought up, pride, because unforgiveness, I mean, is prideful. If it can come from a prideful place. And if, we allow that to manifest, it can turn into something much uglier, when we tend to not, I'm trying to think of how I was thinking of this earlier, in my mind, in my self-talk. But when we don't forgive, we can get prideful, thinking in more of a judgmental way. And then that brings me kind of into some of the conversation, and I don't want to, linger on this too long, because I could probably go on for days, but it brings me to some, thoughts of my own marriage, where earlier on, if Marty and I argued, we could, in a very prideful way, just be unforgiving and just hold a grudge, or constantly bring up that we didn't like how they did that, or that they did this or they did that. And it could be a very small thing. And, God has a way of teaching us a lesson, and, not that he makes bad things happen, but over time, when things come up, he uses situations to teach us in a deeper way how to do certain things. And in my case and Marty's, it was forgiveness. And we had to step into deep forgiveness for one another for certain things when we were in our own depression, whether, it was speaking out against one another, in certain actions I took with, I think I talked last week about, on occasion, I would have a few too many drinks to put myself to sleep in the evening, because I went through such a depression after my kids went to school and I had to go back to work. And, and then when we went through some financial difficulties and things like that, and, Marty often talked to other people rather than talking to me. We had to dive deep to forgive one another for the offenses that we had in our marriage. And, we had to suck it up. We had to get over ourselves and, eat our pride and have that unconditional love. And that was something big that I had made a note on earlier, that there isn't unconditional love without the ability to forgive. I mean, it just does not exist. If you cannot forgive, then you cannot unconditionally love anyone, because, it all stems from being able to love them fully for who they are. And if you're going to love them for who they are when they fall, then you can grow into that unconditional love. And I have to say, it's a good lesson to learn over 20 years of marriage. It's tough at times, but that's just what it made me think of. We can be so prideful and not want to admit that we were wrong, or admit that that we will forgive other people for what they've done to us, and different things with that.
Yeah, I've been on both sides of the coin, and the pride thing gets you every time. And when we're in need of forgiveness, like if we are the one that's done the offense, I'll just say it that way. We're the ones that done the offense. A lot of times we can have pride that comes in, and we start walking on this path of justification instead of a path of repentance. And I think, that can go on both sides. Instead of, pride and justification, it can be pride and judgment, thinking that, oh gosh, I can't believe that person did that. Oh, that's just, like you were saying earlier, unforgivable. And at the end of the day, it's like when you understand the depths of the forgiveness that you received from Christ, that they don't, he doesn't measure sin, and, a lie is just as bad as murder. When you understand the depths of that, you understand that unconditional love that he gave and continues to give. And the direct result of grasping a hold of his unconditional love ends up being forgiveness. I mean, that's the whole point of the cross. He died so we were forgiven. And who are we to be unforgiving of others? I mean, when you're being unwilling to forgive somebody, whatever distance it has to be, like up close and personal conversation or from a distance, and all the varying degrees in between, if you are willing and prideful to think that you don't have to forgive that person, then you got the whole thing like just jacked up. Like you're not getting the whole of this life.
That reminds me of that Romans 5:15 that we were talking about earlier. And the result of God's gracious gift is very different from the result of that one man's sin. For Adam's sin led to condemnation, but God's free gift leads to our being made right with God, even though we are guilty of many sins. For the sin of this one man, Adam, caused death to rule over many. But even greater is God's wonderful grace and his gift of righteousness for all who will receive it, if we live in triumph over sin and death through this one man, Jesus Christ. And basically, it was because of Jesus we can trade judgment for forgiveness. Because of Jesus, we can trade judgment for forgiveness.
Yeah.
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 Exactly, Deidre. A relationship is more important than who's right or wrong. Absolutely. There were some really good points made here. Brad was saying about unforgiveness breeds bitter roots. That's the truth. I mean, you can be in, you're hurt, and whether it's in that same relationship with bitter roots, or it can, even fall over into other relationships because you're constantly having that roll through your mind and you're worried about other people. It can cause that bitter root to start to grow in all of your relationships, really. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but it just made me think of that scripture, and it was like one of the last things that caught my eye today.
Yeah, no, that's really good. As we were, I was also trying to read the comments because I wanted to respond. What you said, Destiny, was really good too. That it is easy to justify things because it is hard to admit when you're wrong. It's like the most, it can be humiliating, but it can also be humbling. It just depends on what side of the road you want to take. Do you want to just like crawl in a hole and be humiliated and and tuck your tail and run? Or do you just want to be humble and say, yeah, I screwed up. You have that humble and repentant heart about the mistake that you made, and all of that stuff. And that just leads to so much smoother sailing, not just in your own personal life, but with others around you, because, the whole point of the repentance is just understanding, in your humility that, yeah, you messed up, and now it's walking out your life, changing for the better. And sometimes people will forgive and sometimes people won't. And you have to be okay with that, because at the end of the day, your audience is the audience of one, and he is the one that already forgave you. And that's really where rubber meets the road. And once he forgives you, then everyone can either choose to follow suit or not, and that it's not about you. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so, like, as I was kind of studying this, the Lord kind of brought me to this several stories. But the one that kind of really resonated with me was the story of Judas. And, we all know the story. He betrayed Jesus with a kiss and took bribery and all that stuff. But the revelation that I got from it, this time around, was that, he took his own life out of guilt. And had he not, I fully believe that Jesus would have sought him out, restore him the way he restored Peter after he resurrected, right? And I just think we get to this point when we're the ones in need of forgiveness, that we're convinced that we're not worthy of it. And when we've done that, we kill ourselves spiritually. And I mean that, and that we're killing the purpose for which we're created. Because when we deem ourselves unworthy of Christ's forgiveness, then how could we possibly walk in the fullness to which he's called us to be? We are each individually, uniquely created. We are as unique as our fingerprints, and the purpose over our lives are just as unique. And if we're acting as though we're unworthy of receiving that forgiveness, we're basically saying that what Jesus did on the cross was not for us.
Right. Yes.
And
absolutely.
He didn't die for us to become self-imposed martyrs to our own sin.
Right.
You just have to get to this place. Yeah, you might feel lowly, you might feel unworthy for a moment of time, because whatever it is that you did was unforgivable. But you are worthy. You have a purpose. And the Lord didn't die for some worthless thing. He died for you and your purpose that he's called you to be. And I just think we can get in this like mess of a thing of unforgiveness for others and unforgiveness for ourselves. And I think sometimes forgiving ourselves is a heck of a lot harder than it is forgiving others, depending on the situation. Did you want to add to that?
That just made me think back to a time when Marty and I were really struggling in our marriage, and we both had a lot of forgiveness to give to one another. And it was actually one of the first times I had heard the Lord through my writing, where I just started to write and found that it was a word for somebody other than just him speaking to me. And it was a word to Marty. And if I could read it real quick, I just pulled the main points of it. But it truly is what he is trying to speak to people when he's trying to tell them to forgive themselves, because Marty didn't grasp the fact that he needed to forgive himself and move forward, and he was okay in God's eyes. And so basically the Lord said, take off the old and put on the new. You need only to seek me and you will find me. I will renew your spirit. I can give you all the powers of heaven and earth to strengthen you. Come to me and I will help you. You need not be afraid. You have already been forgiven. My child, I have created you for great things, and you will accomplish these and so much more through me. So not only was he saying, I forgive you, but I still have a destiny planned for you. and
Yeah.
you didn't mess it up. You know, this is a blip in the road, and you're going to make it. And I believe in you. And can you imagine? I mean, if we all did that for one another every time. And then that brings me to, I was thinking the the one biggest thing, like I said, we struggle, with forgiving one another, whether it's family or friends. But in our marriage, it's really tough, and then when life gets really tough, when you're older and you have all these bills and things come against you and you lose someone in your family and depression sets in and finances are a mess, it seems like there's one thing after another that comes to you. And I remember someone saying, how many times will you forgive him? And I said, in my brain just suddenly went to that scripture, Matthew 18:21, where Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times should I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? And Jesus answered, I tell you not 7 times, but 77 times. And I mean, when that scripture entered my mind, I knew right then I needed, no matter what, to continue to forgive him, just as I would want him to continue to forgive me, because I'm not perfect and we all mess up. And I liked something Lori said earlier, and it went right along with that. Sorry, Lori, I'm coming back to this. Sometimes understanding somebody, where they're coming from, dissolves all offense. That is so true. If we know why someone is, if their actions are reflections of what they're going through, then we can figure out what stemmed their behavior, and then it's much easier to forgive. If we look at, in this past year, I've talked to a lot of different people in their marriages and, reflecting back on mine. And I'm sorry I'm saying a lot of it from my end, but trust me, Marty forgave me a lot too, but I can only speak mostly from my point, but I'm sure there'll be a time where he's sitting here too. But if I look back, sorry, I just had a moment's loss there. I had to think back to Lori's comment, when you know where someone's coming from. If I would have known that his actions were stemming from a deep depression that had been growing over 5 years, I might have known why he was acting out in certain ways, why he was verbalizing certain things, why he was doing certain things, and why it was so hurtful to me, why it seemed to be so, focused and aimed and targeted at me. And I could have been forgiving a lot sooner, or I might have paid more attention to it at that time. And, unfortunately, I didn't at first. And later, knowing exactly where one of the largest offenses came from, it was easily forgiven. And I say easily when I say I knew I was going to forgive it, because I knew where the hurt stemmed from that caused the actions. I knew that it was much deeper and darker than even Marty, and so I was able to do that. It didn't mean that it wasn't painful to forgive. It didn't mean that it wasn't something that I needed to walk through and step through a lot of muck and mire to get through. But I knew in my heart I could forgive it, because I knew exactly where he was coming from when he was doing things that weren't necessarily good to me. And, luckily he did the same for me then as well. So
Yeah.
Yep, the enemy does love misunderstandings, Lori. You are so, so right. He tries to throw so many little ones in there at us. Um, I'm trying to read Sarah's comment there. I was not ready to get.
It's funny. And it's so true.
Sarah, I have said that, Sarah, like a million times. Like, I've seriously said that. I'm like, seriously? Like, how many times do I have to practice at this? Like, I'm done. Like, really? That's great. Good one. Sorry to go on there for a little bit, but that was just something, I just had seen Lori's comment, didn't want to interrupt and you know, it's so true. If we know where the person's coming from when they do the thing that's unforgivable, then we can forgive. I mean, it usually
Yeah.
stems from something much deeper that has nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
You're
You know,
right,
in my
Dawn.
case, oh, yeah. Yeah. You know, and a lot, like from my experiences in the past, that level of understanding didn't really come to me. I mean, I'm kind of a slow learner, but that understanding of that person situation really didn't come until I was actually in the place where I was willing to say, you know what, I need to forgive this person, or I need to forgive this, or whatever. And then it was just all of a sudden the Lord was just like, okay, now you gave me permission to help you walk through this forgiveness
Hmm.
process, and now I'm going to give you wisdom. I'm going to give you understanding. I'm going to give you discernment over that person and the situation. And, you know, when you're forgiving someone, if it's from a distance, I'm just going to speak from this experience. When it's from a distance, the Lord will give you that information um, to then pray for that person. So
Hmm.
you're going to
Oh, yeah.
praying for the person that hurt your
Hmm.
feelings, that hurt you, that offended you, however you want to title it. You are now going to be put into position of understanding and wisdom to be then praying for that person, interceding for that person in the situation. And at some point, some form of reconciliation is going to happen. And,
Yeah.
you know, like I said, you know, boundaries are always healthy. You've got to have boundaries because you can't be around hurtful people and all that stuff. Um, but if you continue to keep yourself in a position where you refuse to walk in unforgiveness, you refuse to walk in offense, then that's going to open the doors for you to continue to walk further and further into what the Lord has called you to do, because
Absolutely.
he's not going to let you speak into people's lives if you're perfectly
Hmm.
fine with anger and unforgiveness and offense and bitterness and all that junk. He's just not going to, you know, people don't want to hear that. And even if you're talking about positive, encouraging things, if you're walking around with unforgiveness and anger and all that junk, your words will still drip with that tone. I don't care what you say, they do. I've listened to it and call that discernment or whatever you want to call it, but
Hmm.
you will hear it in the spirit. And you've got to walk through things that are very difficult. They're very hard, and it is not easy at all. Ever, it's not easy. And you know, like Sarah was saying, the whole testing. Okay, well, you pass that test, you get to do the next one, and it's going to be a little tougher this time. It's ongoing, and we always have to kind of keep that learning spirit about us, that you know, we never reach the pinnacle fully.
Right. Something you were saying in there about, you know, God's goodness manifesting. It's just, if I look back at Brad's quote right there, it says, not forgiving someone is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. I mean, when we're not forgiving, um, you know, we're preventing ourselves, we're hurting ourselves.
Yeah.
And then, you know, he had said a few times about the boundaries things being so important, and trying to make sure I find it here. Boundaries are an act of love, not punishment. You know, there's one person that has, you know, severely wounded me verbally, and I was doing my best to reconcile and be even friendly with that person again, but I just kept getting trampled on and trampled on and trampled on. And I ended up um, setting a boundary to the point that I never thought that I would, because I thought, oh, you have to act out in love, and that means you have to always be nice. Where I literally don't even, like, if I can help not to look up, it's not that I'm being mean. I literally sit there and say a prayer for that person when I see them. It's not that I'm being rude. It's a boundary that I have to set, because if there's any type of interaction, there's a severe wound shot at me like an arrow, and it's really kind of odd. And then Sarah brings back that she looks, you know, at these people like if they were a child, and who damaged this person. I mean, that's how I'm looking at this person. I'm thinking in my head, like, whatever happened to you that's causing you to be this way. And so I'm not angry at them anymore. I'm not upset. I'm not unforgiving. I completely and fully forgive them. I'm sad that we can't get to a place where we have a friendship or anything like that. But I think they need prayer. So that's what I'm going to do. And we can do that. And that boundary is an act of love and not punishment. Because maybe if they're not engaging with me and they're not doing what they're doing anymore, maybe something will change there for them. And maybe through the power of prayer, it will help too.
Yeah. You know, where a lot of things can be misread, misunderstood, miscommunicated is when you have to, when you get to that place where you have to set boundaries. Sometimes there's the moment where you have to communicate that. And if we're not communicating in love, if we're not communicating properly, then more offense can happen with that particular person or that particular situation.
Yeah.
You know, I think some people get into this self-preservation mode, like they're getting hit from all sides and they're just like walls, you know, and it immediately just blocks people off that were not, you know, intending on being hurtful or anything like that, but they just completely cut everybody off in self-preservation. And when those get shoved up, other people get offended and other people get hurt, and there's no communication there. And then, excuse me, and then people are just kind of left wondering, oh my gosh, what did I do? You know, and it was lack of communication, and then in slithers offense. Yes. And then it boils over. And it's never good. So no matter what side of the coin you're on, communication is key. And that communication has to be dripping in love, in unconditional love, no matter what it is.
Absolutely. You're talking about offense, and I just think of even just like small interactions on a daily basis. We can take something, and this is beyond forgiveness because it's not even something that needs to be forgiven. We just immediately become offended. And that can come from us being, you know, unforgiving in our past against something that bothered us. So then when someone else does something similar, we automatically think that they're behaving a certain way. I have a joke with, we have a guy that does some painting for us. And if I don't hear back from him, I tell him, I think you don't like me anymore. And then when he writes back and I say, you know, what time are you going to be at the job or whatever. If he just puts a K, I say, no. If you're being nice, it has to be KK, you know, because we could get so offended by really dumb stuff, and I'm being silly about it, but it's so true. You know, my brother and I have two very different ways of communicating, and he's short and quick. I mean, my goodness, there's no way that I'm like that. So I have to know who he is to understand that that's why he's communicating the way he is. So I can joke about it like I am with the painter, but that's really with anyone, you know.
Yeah.
So I like what Lori said here. I liked what Kim said up there too, where Kim said it's almost touch base on that one first. The love you feel for some of those that you forgive is so awesome. I mean, if I can go back and look at a couple other instances, you know, looking at the guy that had hit my parents and killed my father, you know, I didn't think that I could forgive something like that. And I knew within 24 hours, I knew that I forgave him, even though I feel like there was a negligence there. And, you know, it was horrible what had happened. He didn't wake up that morning and say, I'm going to ruin some people's lives and I'm going to destroy their happiness. And then I'm going to cause a ripple effect that almost causes divorce and all these other things. He didn't do that. Like, it was an accident, and he needed to be forgiven, and he needed to be told that he was forgiven. And I prayed on that. And God actually allowed me shortly before our court date to run into him in the grocery store. And I recognized him immediately and went up to him. And, and this was not me. It was like Jesus was walking me through it, but had me go up to this person and ask if that's who they were. And even when I got the words back, like, who are you? And I said, I'm Robert Simler's daughter. Who is that? Oh, the person that you hit and killed. And I think there was remorse. It was like, oh my goodness. And you could see it in his face. And we had a conversation standing there, and I told him, I've forgiven you, and I want you to just make your life right. And then I had asked him a couple other things. And in the end, we were both ready to turn away. And I said, can I hug you? And I literally could just see him almost collapse. Like it was just like overwhelming. And I mean, I'm sure things have been tough on him trying to get past all of that in the years that followed. And, I'm sure it will take him some time. And I just hope and pray that eventually some right decisions are made, because he understands that he was forgiven. Hopefully, eventually he'll hear those words again so that it makes a difference in his life, and then the ripple effect continues.
Yeah.
So after that, it was like, what Kim was saying about the love that you feel for them, whether it was just love for him as, another person and just caring for them, or the love that I felt for my husband or the other people that have offended me. It's overwhelming when you get over something and you look at other people's past and why they may have caused harm in your life, or in your marriage, or your family, or with your child. We look at all the things that happen to our children as they start to grow up, and we can get, there can be a lot of unforgiveness for friends that have caused certain things. And, if we look past that. And then Lori had said here, I remember Todd White saying that when somebody hurts him, he has compassion for them because they obviously have forgotten who they are. That is so on point, Lori. Like, that is so on point, because I think that's the big thing. Like, when I had to go back to work after the girls were in school, I did forget who I was. And it was there was a loss of identity there, because I'd waited all of my life to be a stay-at-home mom, all of my life. And those 6 years flew by so fast. And because those 6 years were often spent in turmoil with this happening financially or that happening financially, it was this huge sacrifice. It was terrifying that it was over in a blink of an eye. And I didn't know what I wanted to be. Nothing else was as big as being a stay-at-home mom. Nothing else, outside of being married, which I was still in my marriage, and, I just, to fall into depression and to sit and self-medicate, to fall asleep having a third glass of wine, or have a little extra on the weekend after the kids are in bed, just because I just needed to feel okay. That wasn't who I was, and I had forgotten who I was. And the same goes for Marty, the different ways that, I was hurt in our marriage due to his actions. He was not who he was at all. Like, depression, hurts from other people's pasts, whoever it is, they're not acting out because of, out of arrogance of who they are. They've forgotten who they are. They truly have forgotten who they are.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's totally an identity crisis, and then comes along that one person or that one situation that gives you that face-to-face encounter with Christ. And I was thinking about that when you were sharing about you meeting and forgiving the gentleman that hit your parents. You were an encounter with Christ, and I think when we are willing to walk in forgiveness. Like, it's a continual walk. Like, it's not just like an action that you do and you get to check off that box on this person or this situation and then go on with your merry life. It's a like ongoing thing, because life just happens on a daily basis. So I think when we're willing to walk in that forgiveness, we are willing to walk into situations and be each person's encounter with Christ. About those other stories that he kind of highlighted to me as I was doing my prep. It was, he kind of highlighted the adulterous woman, and he highlighted Peter and the thief on the cross. They all three encountered him differently, but he was the same. He encountered them with love. He encountered them with his forgiveness, and he restored them somehow, some way. I mean, obviously the thief on the cross was still dying for his sins, but he received Jesus' forgiveness without repenting. He just said, if you're willing. And Jesus was like, yeah. The adulterous woman, he didn't even have to address her in her sin. Like, she knew. I mean, they like paraded her out in front of everybody. I mean, how humiliating is that? And he just called everyone else out on their stuff. Okay, well, are you sin free? No. I mean, it's that encounter with him on every level possible. And that's what we need to be. We need to be that encounter for everyone on a daily basis. And sometimes it comes in forgiveness, and sometimes it's just, in other ways that he highlights to us. But since we're talking about forgiveness,
yes.
It's being that encounter. And what life you gave that gentleman, you'll never, you might get to have a glimpse of that later on down the road, or you may never until we, you know what I mean? It has an eternal ripple effect.
Absolutely.
And sometimes those people that don't know that you've forgiven them, that will have a ripple effect over their life, because you've forgiven them, you've been praying for them, and they don't even know it. Ripple effect.
Well, and something Brad just had said about when, remember, when you forgive, you heal, and when you let go, you grow.
Yep.
I mean, that's so true. And so that's just a ripple effect. When I was forgiving in different instances in my life, it did help me heal. And then there's a ripple effect there, because then I want other people to heal, and forgive and heal and forgive and heal and forgive. So, I just want that to keep going on. And then before I saw that, and to go back to what Sarah said, and justice, and sometimes it looks like consequences. Other times it looks like undeserved freedom. That the only thing that's holding these people accountable is our anger. I think that's one of the biggest lessons, whether it was in this situation with the court. We didn't go after this kid and say we're going to sue him, because it didn't matter to us, what happened to him. We knew that God, would cause whatever needed to happen to him as far as punishment to happen. And it might be due to this accident as far as what he's given, or it might be at another point, down the road. We just don't know when and how and where, but God has the justice, the weights of justice. What are the scales of justice? Scales of justice.
Yeah.
Like, doing a little dance. I'm dancing, Brad.
Yeah. If he didn't go to jail, he probably still went to prison. He's still like in his own prison of his own circumstances. And even if jail isn't a consequence, the guilt and the remorse and the after effect of coming to a realization of what happened is just as much a prison as sitting behind a jail cell, sitting in a jail cell. So, there is a lot of that. And and I love what Sarah said, because I can totally resonate with what you said, Sarah. Um, just out of that anger and out of that hurt, um, you you almost feel the need to inflict consequences on that person,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just kind of digging your own. You're putting yourself in. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. You're doing more harm to yourself by inflicting consequences on others, um, and all of that stuff, and it's so easily justifiable, because when things like that happen that are so hurtful and so offensive,
Right.
it's easy, and justifiable, that you have every right to be mad, you have every right to be hurt, you have every right to feel that. It's absolutely justifiable. But it takes a level of humility to understand, like what you were saying, Sarah. It's that relinquishing and just saying, yeah, I have every right to feel that way. I have, everything's justifiable, but I absolutely cannot. It's toxic. It is
Right.
toxic in my life. It's going to, be toxic to everything and everyone around me. And, chances are that person's not even near you because of the hurt or the offense or whatever. So, I mean, it's just, it's kind of just putting your hands up in that surrender and saying, I'm choosing, as painful as this is, and as much as I might even do it kicking and screaming, because I don't know that this person deserves forgiveness right now, because you do have those thoughts, you do have those feelings. I just don't know that I can right now. I'm too mad. I'm too hurt. Been there, done that. It's a hard road, and there's nothing good that ever comes out of that. And so I think we do just have to, it's all in our control, what we're willing to do and what we're willing to have in our life. Are we going to live in peace and freedom, walking through that forgiveness? Because if you're not willing to walk through that forgiveness, you're not going to have peace in your life. You're going to always be upset. You're going to always be offended. And the littlest things will just trigger you and set off an avalanche of all kinds of junk. And then people around you are going, oh my gosh, it wasn't even that big of a deal. Why are they so upset about this? It's because they got all this other stuff that they weren't really, willing to like let go of and fully walk out that forgiveness process. Some people, they'll start feeling okay, and then they just decide that, okay, it's all over with. And then they're still getting triggered. So, it's a process. Exactly.
It's just
it does keep you locked in the past. And
it
sorry.
does. Oh no, that's okay. If you go back to what Sarah was saying, and what you had just brought up about, we almost feel like they need to be punished. I mean, and I'm talking about somebody that we're not in relationship with, but they're not someone that we have communication with even. It's just their actions either hurt us or hurt our family. And I can tell you this, I started to fully walk in this around 2012, where I just fully believed that anytime I was wronged, especially by somebody, that I didn't know, that I could have taken action against, whether it was harassment or, someone that had almost caused harm to our family. Had I gone back after them and either pressed charges or made it known what they were doing publicly, that was not my right to do. I forgave them and I moved on. And every time, and I love when God just feeds you scripture, just like that 77 times with Marty, I would continuously we will be fed at a table before our enemies. And I just would always think of that. It's like, I just knew that there was nothing I needed to do, that God would be my vindication and he would take care of it. In every instance, that's what happened. Whether, someone got off with an easy verdict in court, and what happened to them later, whatever should have happened. You know, someone was hurting our family through the workplace, and eventually, with no action of ours, but just letting go and letting God, forgiving that person and walking away from it, and literally praying for that person, blessing them. Eventually, in judgment, you know, they moved on from that job, not by choice. And it was not by anything that happened with us. It was just something that happened. And so I never need to be, you know, handing out sentences, and judgments on people, because that's God's job. You know, and he'll take care of us, and he'll take care of them, and he'll give us what we need, and he'll give them what they need. And, you know, and it goes for us too. When we wrong someone and do the wrong thing, you know, God has a way of letting us know that's not acceptable.
Yep.
And
yeah, he's our justification. He's our vindicator. He is our restorer, you know, and his mercy and grace is over every single one of those things. So, you know, when you like let go and let God, I love that simple phrase. I see it all the time, but it's just so true.
Yeah.
When you let go and let him handle it, you know, he's going to handle you in the place that you're at. And if that's walking you through this forgiveness, helping you let go of anger, helping you let go of hurt, or helping you come to a place of healing and restoration, bringing back that identity to you that he placed within you, you know, reminding you who you are in him, on both sides of that coin. Let him, just let him.
Yes.
Like, you don't have to worry about outside influence. And yeah, I love what Anne-Marie said, because he will totally take care of it. And I have seen that manifest and work out in my life in so many ways, that it would take, you know, another hour to even talk about that. So, you know, it just, but it's been in that place of total surrender and willing to walk in forgiveness, willing to walk in, you know, for myself, for others, and letting him do what he intends to do.
I like Deidre's point where she says forgiveness is a choice, not a feeling. The feelings catch up as we heal, you know, and that, I mean, that just reminds me of the love is not, love is a choice, not a feeling, you know, and it really truly is. We have to choose to love. We have to choose to forgive. And that shows where we're choosing to walk more like Christ, when we're able to do it, even when we don't feel like doing it, when we choose to do it, no matter what. And that just brings me back to something we talked about last week when we were talking about intentional actions and loving. And the gentleman that gave me the advice of all of my actions, all of my words should be made in love, when Marty was going through his depression, so that he would understand that I had to make a choice, no matter what was coming against me, every single day, to love and forgive him. Love and forgive, love and forgive, just as he did me in my period. I feel like I always have to say that because I don't want to sound like I'm putting him in the hot seat all the time. But, you know, we have to choose. We have to choose. And now that we've learned this one big lesson, it's like Sarah was saying a little earlier, like, I'm so grateful for all of the pain we walked through to figure this out, because now it's like instantaneous. You know, we don't have like this hard battle and things like that. I love what Sarah said, where she said, forgiveness is like exercise. It's really hard beforehand, challenging in the moment, but feels amazing afterwards, especially when you feel the results. Isn't that the truth? Yeah, that's awesome. That's a good bumper sticker too. I saw Lori said that one of Brad's comments was a good bumper sticker. It was. And now here's Sarah. What are you, this woman of awesome, like, awesome quotes? God, you really need to come up with like little cards and maybe like sell them in bulk. God said to me, don't let a fence build a fence. It never stays in one area of our lives. We end up putting up fences all over the place and we end up isolated and alone. That is
Yep.
so true. So
Very much.
true. Oh, come on. Oh, so Brad, yeah. That's right. You are perfect. You play a perfect golf game too. I forgot about that. Oh my, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. There was something else on here. There's just so many good things. I don't want to like.
I know I didn't miss any of them.
I like what Lori said too about when you it keeps you locked in the past. You end up facing in the wrong direction, and that's so true. We can constantly, be looking back on what's happened instead of where we're going. And I'm just so grateful for the direction that all of this has sent, us in. It was a big lesson to learn to forgive in this capacity, but I'm missing these comments down here now.
Said every man ever, Brad.
Oh my, Sarah, you're awesome. You're killing me tonight. Just cracking me up.
Yeah.
But just to go on with a little bit of everything, tying everything to what we were saying and what you had brought up in the beginning, is forgiveness truly brings, us into God's fullness. It helps manifest in our lives, and we begin walking in his promises. The more that we're walking and making that choice, like Deidre said, the more we're making the choice of forgiveness, making the choice of loving. When we're doing that, the more we're walking and trying to be more Christ-like, the more we're experiencing God's fullness here, the more his promises manifest in our lives, and the more we're experiencing his goodness here in this lifetime. And if people would recognize and realize that sooner, I wish I would have.
Yeah, same here.
Life can be a lot easier. It doesn't mean that we're not going to experience bad times here, but we walk through them with more of an ease. I'm not saying life is perfect right now. I'm not saying our marriage is perfect right now, but we walk through so much with an ease and a loving and understanding and an immediate forgiveness that wasn't there before. There's no pride, that's there. Oh, here we have another man. There we go. We have a man representing on each side of the world. There we go. It's balanced now. Do I need to bring Marty in here, Brad? And then we'll have 3. We'll have one from the north and one from the south, and then one from the other side of the world.
Yeah.
Agnes, now we know how you feel when we're being sidetracked. So I might have to have a little block party here, right, Agnes? So
awesome.
Let's block the men. Just kidding.
Yeah. That's
Oh
funny.
my. I'm just lucky. I shouldn't say this out loud, but I'm going to. I'm lucky my Wi-Fi is working. If I zip out of here immediately,
yeah.
Have I been scratching in and out here?
No, I don't think so.
Wow.
Not that I've. Yeah.
Check that out, Brad. Oh my.
Yeah, Kat. It is hard. It's a very hard road because, like whenever, whatever it is that you're trying to forgive yourself for, like you fully know what that situation and all of that looks like, and so to grasp like a hold of that and just recognizing, this is where, I messed up. This is where I failed or whatever you want to label it. You got to just kind of put it here and just, remind yourself that, God has forgiven me. Who am I to not forgive myself? It's not going to be it's not going to be an instantaneous thing. It is a full on process. And I'm going to tell you what the Lord's going to do. He's going to reacquaint you with yourself. and show you who you are through his eyes. And he's going to just overload you with his unconditional love, because that's really what it's all about. That's where the tough part of that journey is learning to love yourself despite whatever it is that you did. And it is that a scripture that like love covers the multitude of sins or whatever? I'm so bad about memorizing scripture. But that's really what it is. He's going to reacquaint you with him and reacquaint you with his love to help you love yourself again, despite, that mess up. And, I don't know what religious teaching I was under when I was young or whatever, but it was always under the pretense of like, if you screw up, the Lord's gonna give your calling to someone else. I don't know why I believed that, but I did. And through my journey over the last several years, the Lord was like, that was so wrong. Like, that wasn't like in my word at all. And that if you stumble and fall, it was just something that you tripped over in the road. It was just something that tripped you up on the path that I have you on. And like, you're never leaving the path that he has set you on. And, if you trip and fall, so what? You get back up, you dust yourself off, you learn from it, and then you keep going. I mean, there's no, detours or no, none of that. It's your path, what you were called to do, what he purposed you for. And so he's going to walk through that journey with you, tripping, falling, standing, walking, and running.
Absolutely. If we could, I'd like to say a prayer for Kat and for anyone that's struggling with, not being able to forgive themselves, if I could. Gracious God, my heart is heavy with my own failures. I try to excuse them and explain to myself why they occurred, because I want to be free from the feeling that I am unworthy and incapable of being all that I can be. But I find it easier to accept your forgiveness than to forgive myself. When I try to forgive myself, it seems I only remember and replay my failures in my mind, and a sense of hopelessness floods over me. Help me to know that my past actions are a part of my growing humanity, and that even when I fail to live up to what is your will for me, every single moment can be lived anew. Remind me that refusing to forgive myself only keeps me from experiencing that newness. Assure me of the truth that by casting my sins into the depths of the sea, you have freed me to discard them myself and live the next moment as if it were my first, for indeed it is. I ask this for the sake of your love, in Jesus' name, amen. And
Amen.
that came from explorefaith.org, if anyone's looking for that.
That's
it's a
awesome.
Prayer for forgiving oneself.
Yeah, and you're right, Kat. Not powerful enough to mess up your destiny. You were created with a purpose, and there's nothing in this earth that can deter that purpose from you. Our choices might slow it down a little bit, but if you are making those choices to move forward and let the Lord show you who you are and who he created you to be, he's going to walk through that with you, and he's going to walk through that process of forgiving yourself.
Yep.
Yeah, Sarah, that's right. Forgiveness is part of God's will for our lives. Like I was saying earlier, had Judas not, I can't imagine the remorse and regret that he felt. But had he not done what he did, like if he didn't go and kill himself, I can't help but feel how much restoration would have come to him, and what else the Lord had purposed over his life beyond that moment, beyond that bad choice, that there was so much more for him had he been able to wait around to see that. Yeah,
I just
love that, Sarah.
and I believe that, just like you were talking about earlier, so that we could have encounter after encounter with his grace and unconditional love. I mean, isn't that the truth? And we do, and we have encounter after encounter, and then it helps us grow and walk in it deeper ourselves.
Yeah.
Bringing heaven
journey.
to earth.
Yes. Well, and we're it,
Yes.
We are heaven's manifestation. So either we're going to manifest it or we're not, and it's all in our choices and in what we say and do. So.
We love you too, Brad. Get some sleep and don't forget to say those prayers for the singles when you go to bed.
Yeah. Well, and I think we're probably going to have to cut it off here pretty soon anyway. I've got little ones knocking on the door.
Yes. So we were thinking originally that we were going to be talking about how we hear from God, the different ways that we've heard from God. That's going to be hopefully one of the things that we talk about again. And Kat, I will put a link in the comments when we hop off of here. I won't forget to do that. So we're looking at some different topics that we can bring up, but we are going to be here every Tuesday night. We hope to be on between the 8:30 and 9 o'clock hour starting. We won't commit just because there can always be problems with, the internet or just one of our schedules, but we hope to hop on somewhere around 8:30, 8:45 and spend some time with everybody each week. And it's been a lot of fun being able to do this and talk through.
How to talk about how we hear God, and he said nope and nope.
So we don't know what we're talking about next week. We probably won't know till Sunday.
About hearing God and how we hear, but he might have something else in mind. Yes. He's always welcome to interrupt us. So
we thank all of you for hopping on. We love all of the support. We love all of the interaction. We really enjoy having the family that's been, Brad finally said it, Amy.
I know. I was
he called it
the whole time.
You called it. Brad, we were waiting the entire hour to see if that would become something that somebody brought up.
I wish I heard Brad saying something. I would have won.
Oh, shoot. Well, now next week you'll probably get to see Amy in my pictures again. We'll be broadcasting from my page, and but I'm feeling a room change here, but I might have to move the pictures with my love seat.
Right.
Thank you, Deidre. We love you.
Thank you guys all for joining in the conversation. That's really,
Kim.
Is to have that round table conversation. And this is it's been a lot of fun these past 2 weeks. So I'm really looking forward to the next one. And
this is such, it's when we get to interact like family on here. A lot of us have been communicating like this online, whether it's been on other people's broadcasts or through classes. And it's just that constant and fun communication where you can everyone can put in, their thoughts in it. And I miss that. And I'm so excited that we have that again with, some people that we haven't talked to in a while, and glad that we still have it with people that we're still in contact with. And we hope that it grows. Yes, very much so. All right. We'll go ahead and call it quits, and we will see you next week. Yes. About the same time. Approximately. All right. Thank you. Bye, guys. Bye.